All right, folks, it is time for our weekly overview, which in all honesty, I really should have done yesterday or on Saturday. The intention was to do it on Saturday, partly because the bulk of the aspects that are being made by transiting planets are being made tomorrow. But it 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 is what it is. Luckily, the transits that are being made, the aspects that are being made tomorrow, are thematically things that we have been discussing. I do really love doing daily videos. It keeps up a certain momentum, and the planets are always moving. So it's just that much easier when you've got a momentum going to keep going and talking about what's going on, as opposed to stop for a few days and feel like you're revving up again. Irrespective, let me just give you first a chronology of what is going on this week, and then we can start to break it down. Tomorrow, on July the 2nd, first and foremost, I cannot show you this card, I don't think, based on YouTube rules, or maybe I can show it to you like this. Gosh, how am I going to show this to you? I think YouTube has kind of nudity rules when it comes to the tarot or cards or what is shown on YouTube. But as those of you, the tarot card for June of 2024 was, of course, the Hierophant. And thanks to input from you guys, I was able to finally determine and figure out what the Hierophant means to me, which, as I explained to you in one of the previous videos, was really now my card. All the cards kind of have a core meaning for me, and of course they can stand for all sorts of things. So of course a Hierophant can stand for conventional religion, conventional authority, contracts. I think for some people it's even things like marriage, etc., and I get that. But for me now, the Hierophant, clearly, because there's no other card for this, since it's such an important fact of life, is any form of, let's just call it a holy book. Now, this can actually be one of the conventional holy books, or it can be something else. It's not, scripture can be part of it, but it's really wisdom. It's something that we as human beings have codified and learned. And as I told you, I think my kind of two go-tos when I'm feeling lost are typically Krishnamurti or Raman Maharishi, and it's different strokes for different folks, whoever it is for you. But thanks to input from people in this channel, I was able to kind of do that. The card for, can I figure out how to show it? The card for July is, of course, the Lovers, and I am both Adam and Eve are naked, so I'm kind of hiding their privates. But some of the things that are fascinating about the Lovers card, those of you who know it in the Rider-Waite deck, of course, is that there is an angel overall, kind of so annoying. An angel overall, there we go. An angel overall blessing these two people who are contemplating each other, for lack of a better word. Now, this apple tree behind Eve, also, you can't see it, but has a serpent. And Adam, sometimes in certain things he's carrying a flame, but Adam's got this kind of flamey, flowering tree behind him. And Eve has got the apple tree, and there's the serpent, and there she is, and there he is in all their glory. And there is the angel and the sun. Now, apart from, we assume that this is the Garden of Eden. Now, apart from the literal meaning of the Lovers, I would be very curious, for those of you who know or who dabble in the tarot, what this card means to you. It is the card for July. I do think, when I think back to June, that was a month where if we actually deployed a certain amount of wisdom as we navigated its choppy waters, we would have been better off. I know that according to some people, the Lover's card used to be called the Choice, and sometimes the Lover's card has three people in it, as if someone is choosing between two. And sometimes in a non-romantic context, or a non-union or meeting of two, or soulmate context, whether if in case the relationship is platonic, some people look at the Lover's card as representing a crossroads or a choice. I'd be curious about what it means to you and what you feel the meaning is, especially those of you who are familiar with sort of the Rider-Waite deck or the tarot in general. So looking forward to that. For me, to some extent, the Two of Cups, of course, is much more obviously a relationship card. And with the Lovers, it's interesting because it's card number 6, and the next card that counts to 6 is number 15, which is the Devil, and the Devil shows both this Adam and Eve figure in chains, so it kind of carries that story forward. When it comes to coupling or unions or partnerships or soulmate connections, I do think that the Two of Cups and even friendships or just the meeting of minds or the sharing of information or the sharing, I find that the Two of Cups is an easier card to interpret. And again, it has this kind of angelic blessing on top and a sharing of information between two people. Curious, outside of the literal meaning of Lovers, and the fact that it might represent a choice about what you make of that. All right, that's the card for July. And it's simple to figure out what the card for July is. You add 7 in 2024, and you total what that is, and then you add the digits, and it comes out to 6, and there we have it. The card for next month, August, will be the Chariot card, and we'll stare at it in the first weekly reading then. The aspects this week. We've got Neptune going retrograde tomorrow, being July the 2nd. Tomorrow's July the 2nd. I'm recording this on July the 1st. We've got Mercury trining Neptune and then entering Leo. So Leo season starts up. You guys know that I define the season as starting up when the first of the personal planets enters a particular sign. And so at this point in time, we concurrently have Taurus season continuing, with Mars currently in Taurus till July the 20th. We have Gemini season continuing insofar as we're in the month of Gemini till July the 5th, when we have the new moon in Cancer, which starts up the month of Cancer. We've got Cancer season clearly in progress, with Venus and Mercury and the Sun currently in Cancer, and a new moon in Cancer on July the 5th. And then tomorrow, Mercury enters the sign of Leo and starts Leo season. Not unusual for multiple seasons to be concurring at the same time, and frankly, a much more authentic and I think relatable way to look at things. Because if you were trying to make sense of what is actually going on in the chart and how it's showing up in your life, you could then more easily see what is actually going on in your chart, where these houses sit, the houses occupied by Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and make sense of which planet is where and what the archetypal energy is. And it's much clearer that way than to just say, oh, it's Cancer season. As I've said, I mean, you can't factor Mars out. You could have 5 planets together in one part of your chart, but if Mars is somewhere else, that's where the bulk of our energy will go, as I've mentioned it to you. So tomorrow, the 2nd, Neptune goes retrograde, Mercury trines Neptune, Mercury enters Leo. The Sun squares the nodes, the North Node and the South Node. The North Node and the South Node are in Aries and Libra, and the Sun is in Cancer. Venus in Cancer trines Saturn in Pisces. So that's tomorrow. This is why I wish I'd done this on Saturday as I'd intended, but life happens. On Wednesday, as the planets move into the sign of Leo currently, they're going to oppose Pluto. On Wednesday, Mercury opposes Pluto. And I'll bet you're feeling this. We're going to have to talk about that. On the 5th of July, Venus from Cancer squares Chiron in Aries, and we have the new moon in Cancer. And it is as edgy and squarey as the new moon and the full moon in June were. The new moon and full moon in July have that much more flow in them. This is a new moon that trines Saturn, and there are other aspects too that I'll talk about. And then, of course, we have a full moon on July the 21st that conjuncts Pluto, but also trines Uranus, with the sun trining Neptune. So, as I've been saying to you, May easier, June tougher, July easier, August, ugh. Mercury retrograde one day after the Leo new moon. And the Leo new moon in and of itself is fine. It's just got the stationary Mercury in it. So whatever it is that is going to happen in that Leo month is not going to be able to gather momentum until Mercury goes direct. And this is for everybody, especially who has Mercury direct in their birth chart, which is the bulk of us. So it means that even if you have Mercury retrograde in your birth chart, and the Mercury retrograde, I've got some tea here and I'm just sort of dipping the tea bag. So even if you've got Mercury retrograde in your birth chart and you're that much more aligned while Mercury is retrograde, you're still impacted by the fact that everybody else is kind of slowed down, irrespective. And then the full moon in Aquarius is really, as I look at it, it's sort of one of my least favorite full moons of the year. It's opposite the Mercury retrograde, and it's just got issues, and we'll come to it. So May, flowier, June, edgier, July, flowier, August, edgier. And we start to, by the time we get to the Virgo new moon, Mercury is direct, and actually it's direct by a couple of days. So let's try and enjoy July as best as we can. As I've mentioned to you, May, June, and July are forward movement months. May the flow was easier, and this is probably as good a time as to address this. I've given this analogy of May, we are moving towards moving on a diving board. June, we are being asked to jump off and really commit to whatever it is that we want to create. And then July, we start to swim to the other side. I've had a couple of instances come up, and one of you said, I jumped off the diving board and had to climb back on it. Remember that this analogy that I'm giving is really tied to the Aries North Node eclipses. And that narrative takes us back to 2023 and does not end till June of 2025. So, as you know, there may have been a direction that you have been wanting to go to or develop or lean into starting April 19th of last year, but May, June, July, August of last year, only to find yourself somehow thwarted in September of last year. The October Mercury, September, October Mercury retrograde last year, and the October 14th eclipse in Libra started, and a cycle of release. So between September of last year to May the 24th of this year, you may have felt like you were somehow being held in place and you couldn't really move forward. You somehow thwarted with that forward movement. February, January 20th to February 20th may have given you some clues with regard to what Pluto's is going to be trying to do, very preliminary over the next 19 years in the sign of Aquarius. Middle of February, when we had Mars and Venus conjuncting Pluto in Aquarius, a kind of a dramatic entry into Aquarius. It may have provided some sort of a breakthrough. Then we went into the eclipses, middle of March, and Mercury retrograde in April. Which doors remain open, which doors remain closed, what sort of things start to become crises based on those closed doors. So between the opportunities presented by the open doors, the greater decisiveness presented by the closed doors, and any sort of crises, necessity being the mother of invention, to pull out a popular quote that you guys, one of you posted in the comment section. The agenda for May, June, and July in terms of forward movement became clear. To the best of my ability, this is the direction I'm moving forward in. These are the opportunities that are available to me. This is the crisis that I need to try and avoid. So this is what I'm going to do and move forward. By the time we came into June, the first 2 weeks of June may have presented eclipsy occurrences. For me, this was a very quiet resolve. I did see eclipsy occurrences, some of them in terms of visibility or leap up. But remember, eclipses work in mysterious ways, and they may be pointing you to... Eclipsy occurrences are like breadcrumbs, they're sometimes they're like confirmation that something needs to shift or change or a direction you're moving in. But just remember that the change is not really complete until June of next year. And it's going to be starting September of this year, but accelerating in October of this year through March, April of next year, that we'll really go through the birth canal where we're going to be made to choose. Are we moving in that direction that we think and have thought the North Node wants us to move in? Are we staying where we are? Are we committing? Are we closing out this North Node eclipse cycle where we feel we're being drawn towards? So May, June, and July are not an end destination. So when I'm talking about having to leap off the diving board in June, it was really about, when I say that there's less flow, all of a sudden the universe starts to act like, I'm not going to help you at all. It's all up to you. You need to take the action. You need to make things happen. You make things happen. Do this, do this. And the part of the challenge of June was that without that kind of flow and with that, and as I said, the squares were heavy. Squares to Saturn and squares to Neptune, especially the squares to Saturn, are heavy. And the entire time period since June the 6th to July the 5th, we have a month that is characterized. The new moon was squaring Saturn. What actions and activities? First and foremost, we had the personal planets, our energy, our communication, our ability to survey things, our opportunities, Venus, the new moon itself, being checked by these slower moving planets, Saturn and Neptune, and probably demanding some action from the faster moving planets to serve them before they let them go. So it's not a comfortable energy. As I've said, as the planets have moved into Cancer, while they are squaring the nodes in Chiron, those are a little bit easier to work with. Luckily, they're trining Saturn and Neptune. And indeed, some of the transits this week are very much continuing that theme of trine. So all of a sudden, those things that felt edgy and conflicty in June kind of relax in July, which is helpful. Now, as the planets move into Leo, the opposition to Pluto is not something to be scoffed at. And we are dealing with that edginess, and that is there as well. But coming back to this idea of diving off the diving board, it's not that we're going to reach a destination as much as we commit to the chain. We commit to, it wouldn't surprise me, even if you feel like you've had to go back on the diving board side. It wouldn't, it's much more, when you are getting ready to move in a certain direction, not only do you have to take actions to make that future a reality, you also have to deal with what you're going to do with where you are in order to be able to move. You can't just, as the only analogy I can give you is the analogy of getting on a plane or a train or moving apartments, where it's like you have to deal with what is going to happen to where you are when you go. Are you going to pack? Are you going to throw things away? Are you going to take care that someone's going to come and take a look at the dogs, the cats? And there's a preparation component, but you're committing to a certain direction. And this commitment, for a lot of us, is still an act of faith, because what this pull is that has been operating since April, May, June, July of last year, I don't think that something definite has shown up yet that we can actually attach to completely, so that we can actually really confidently and securely start moving. But the eclipses in March and April, I wouldn't be surprised if they reconfirmed, yes, this is the direction I want you to lean into, and here's what's open, and here's what's closing, and here's what you've got to get into action to try and avoid. And June, just the energy was harder. But the first 2 weeks of June could have brought eclipsy developments, but don't get too far ahead in, but I don't know that they would be bringing a destination. So I did want to, I'm observing it and I wanted to clarify, and I also wanted to let you know it's part of a longer cycle that is not complete till June of next year. I mean, with eclipses, we're talking about transformation that is significant enough. So diving off the diving board does not equal I've gotten to where it is that I want it to be. It does mean that June, those people who had a more successful June, and the things that will feel successful in June either could mean that there was a kind of eclipsy visibility, especially in the first couple of weeks of June. Could be offers, could be feeling more in the limelight, could be a development, could be something along those lines. Or it could be that some action was taken that at least could make you feel like, okay, well, I'm in motion. And that's a lot to that's, listen. And for those of people for whom June has not been quite as successful, it's likely because it was entirely up to us to be taking those actions. Otherwise, we would be blocked by Saturn. And the other thing, of course, is that during June, Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces made their presence felt again. This kind of crisis in the Pisces part of the chart, which I know some of you are probably sick of me talking about, but we can't let it go because the next eclipse on September the 17th is the first of the North Node eclipses in Pisces. You know, that part of the chart will not let up, and it needs these eclipses, and it needs Saturn to help stabilize it. And indeed, the week before and after July the 17th, I expect might bring for some of us some developments leading to that part of, kind of pointing to that part of the chart. How do we need to lean into that part of the chart? What do we need to develop there? So I thought I would mention that. I'm seeing it and I'm sensing it. What do I mean by forward movement in May, June, July? How does it fit into this overall narrative? What is forward movement as opposed to having to hit the pause button, which we will in August, a lot of us will. What do I mean when I say diving off the diving board? I mean committing to a direction based on whatever evidence we have, which is always a leap of faith to some extent until something concrete shows up that we go, oh, okay, now I can attach to something. And I don't think that something concrete has shown up yet. For some of us, we might get glimmers of that something concrete as a result of this July new moon, July 5th new moon, but especially as we head to July the 21st. Then with a sorting out process in August, and we really start to get to move forward after September. At least that's what, and then the nature of the change and what we're committing to and what we're developing is significant enough that it just doesn't happen immediately. We have a series of retrogrades to make us deliberate and go over what needs to be changed step by step until we are where we need to be by the end of the first week of June next year. And I still don't know if for everyone it's going to be with the North Node. It leads us on because it kind of speaks to our heart. It makes us wish, it makes us want to go in a certain direction. There's a desire component to it. And what we gain through that process is what is important. As I say with the North Node and the eclipses, it promises more than it delivers. So I don't know that we will actually get to that destination or move to that destination or whatever that is, but that process is very important and helpful. And I think that some of us will. And I think some of us in the process may choose, and the choosing process may be very conscious with regard to, are we going there or are we staying? But it's all unfolding. It doesn't take away from the forward momentum and movement in May, June, and July. There's still something we're committing to and moving forward. We may well have entered really the middle of March and into April in a sense of, okay, where do I want to go? Show me a sign. And I think the signs came with the eclipses. These are the doors that are open. These are the doors that are closed. This is the situation. Get in action. And yes, the final thing that you can hook onto, the final invitation, the final is not here yet, but start preparing and start moving. And in July, and even as I said to you, starting last week, some of the energy started to shift, partly because it was the week after the full moon, always a more productive time, and partly because with the planets entering the sign of Cancer and starting to go into trines with Saturn and Neptune, just makes the energy a little bit flowier and easier, and you're not blocked by them. Now, this week, I've given you the chronology, but I'm going to move backwards in a couple of instances. On July the 5th, Friday, for me, Pacific time, we have the new moon in Cancer. I'm going to do a separate video on the new moon. I've already told you it's trining Saturn. I've already told you it feels lovely in comparison to the Gemini new moon, which was squaring Saturn. But the most important thing that I want to convey to you, which some of you already know, is the 48 odd hours before the new moon, so starting Wednesday, energy might start to dip. Now, it's an individual thing. If you're busy and you're doing stuff, you'll be busy and doing stuff. But the energy gets a little flat, a little depressed, a little hopeless. Sometimes before a new moon, alarmingly so. You know, it can really feel like, oh my God, I feel the heaviness, I feel the depression, I feel the lack of energy, I feel the need to rest or sleep. The other thing is on its way to the sign of Cancer, the moon is going to go over the sign of Gemini starting tomorrow, June the 2nd and 3rd, and part of the 4th for me. So whatever that means to you. And that is often a way of closing out this Gemini month that started from, so don't be surprised if sort of themes related to the new moon in Gemini come up again over the next 2 or 3 days as a kind of a closing out the month of Gemini. The energy dips, gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer as the moon gets darker and darker and darker, and then the new moon in Cancer happens. And for me, pretty soon after a new moon, the energy lifts and it feels like the wind is getting behind the sails. The moon is still small, so I don't know that we're going to be jumping into action, but so much depends on what's going on in our lives. I mean, heck, with the full moon in Sagittarius, after I dealt with that and did that, I ended up getting COVID. So the most productive week a month ago for me was exhausted because of whatever it was that I was dealing with. If you have pressing issues you need to deal with and you need to be busy and in action, then what that closing out of energy means, you know, kind of it's through an individual lens, but it's an unmistakable feeling. And I think it's worth mentioning because it's something that you're going to have to contend with. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is Mercury opposing Pluto. Aspects to Pluto that are challenging. An opposition for me is a tug of war, and the slower moving planet will win. It is a face-off. It is a contending. You know, if Pluto is in a room and we're in a hallway and Mercury's in a hallway and it is walking through, it is going to have to look at Pluto and acknowledge Pluto. And even more than in a square, there's a kind of a need or a demand that Mercury serve Pluto. When Pluto is making its transformational energy in Aquarius felt somewhat vaguely because it's so early, it's like a 19-year transit. It's not going to be like, I am here and this is everything I'm going to change. But if you're looking for signs of Pluto and what is on the Plutonian agenda, some of that may have shown up between January 20th and February 20th of this year. And particularly if you're looking for transformation, big transformation, and particularly the Mars-Pluto conjunction on February the 14th, I think it was Valentine's Day. It's not going to give you the full menu of a transformation of the next 19 years, but leading up to that, it could have been for some people kind of a pivotal week leading up to February 14th. So, and while the full mystery of what Pluto's transformation means over the next 19 years is not going to be clear, it could be that for some of us, it's something we check mark and go, noted. When I talk about something occurring in the middle of February that could potentially have opened things up for you again since September of 2023, that's what I'm referring to, these Pluto conjunctions. You know, I think Mercury conjuncted Pluto on February the 5th, then Mars conjuncted Pluto, I think, on the 14th, and then Venus conjuncted on the 16th or something like that of February. I want to share the following dates with you. Mercury opposes Pluto on July the 3rd. Venus is going to oppose Pluto on July the 12th. The Sun is going to oppose Pluto on July the 23rd, but on its way to doing so, on the 21st of July, we will have the full moon, which is conjunct Pluto. And then Mars, and these are the oppositions that are really, Mars and Pluto, when they aspect each other, drama. You know, they have a reputation for being, for lack of a better word, violent. You know, just transformational, dramatic, energetic. Not as energetic as a conjunction necessarily, but an opposition is still not something to be scoffed at. And those oppositions are further down the line, November the 3rd of this year. But because Mars goes retrograde also on January the 3rd of 2025 and April the 26th of 2025. So this squaring off with Pluto. And Pluto is in the very first degree of Aquarius right now. And it has enough of an orb that we can really say that while it is technically in Aquarius, it is between September and November, it will be back in Capricorn again, where it has been since 2008. So the Capricorn part of your chart, the house occupied by Capricorn, and I have videos of Pluto in Capricorn. You can search for them and it'll walk you through, it'll give you information on that. I think I did videos earlier this year about Pluto and Aquarius as well, kind of overview videos as I do. I've done overview videos on Capricorn, the transits in the sign of Capricorn, Aquarius. Those are all references. There's a reason why I might be doing a weekly overview, and then a few days I just decide to go macro and kind of look at what is going on in a particular sign for the rest of the year. And because I use the whole sign system, WHOLE, it's which house is occupied by that sign in your chart and what that stands for. So which house is occupied by Capricorn, which house is occupied by Aquarius. Pluto this year is going between the two, wrapping up its transformation. And with Pluto, the transformation is slow but tremendous, complete. In our best interests. And this issue of power struggles only really seems to show up if we're resisting it or somebody else in our lives is resisting it, resisting the change that Pluto wants to make. What is it that Pluto is demanding of Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and that full moon on the 21st? That has helpful aspects to it as well. I mean, we have a full moon that's trining Uranus. And Uranus and Pluto don't start trining officially till 2026, until Pluto is properly in Aquarius, which it will be after November of this year. And Uranus is properly in Gemini in 2026. But they are within 5 degrees of each other pretty soon and shortly. Indeed, my next video is going to talk about this. So, and Uranus is another planet of transformation in exciting ways, in ways that are individual to us. And Pluto is even bigger transformations in ways that are individual to us. And it's nice to kind of have them being in flow eventually, and what that will mean and bring up for us between the Gemini part of the chart and the Aquarius part of the chart. But and then, of course, Mars. How have the last 4 or 5 days been for you? It's lovely that tomorrow we have Mercury trining Neptune and Venus trining Saturn from Cancer. These are the trines that have sort of opened up some of the energy and greater flow. Saturn and Neptune and Pisces are not blocking the personal planets. There's something that these planets can do or provide from the sign of Cancer that supports Saturn and Neptune in the Pisces part of your chart. And so many of my last week's videos were around this topic that you can always kind of play catch up and go back to those. Mercury, the planet of communication, in flow with Neptune. So if in the Pisces part of the chart, you're trying to move towards an artistic career, spiritual career or activities, Mercury in the sign of Cancer can support that communication, transactions. Venus, finances, relationships can support Saturn trying to provide more structure and stability in Pisces. That is all I'm going to say about it. If you want more information about this particular flow, look at the last few videos that I've done, because I don't want to. But the opposition to Pluto it will become clearer and it will develop. With the Mercury opposition in a couple of days, it may not yet be completely clear. Mercury's communication, cognition, our mind, what it makes sense of. A lot depends on the Aquarius part of your chart and the Capricorn part of the chart and the Cancer Leo part of the chart. Mercury will square Pluto. Mercury will be in Leo. Pluto will be in Aquarius. But Mercury will barely be in Leo. Mercury on tomorrow is going to trine Neptune, enter Leo, and then on the 3rd oppose Pluto. So some of this conversation is also about what could Mercury be doing from the Cancer part of the chart to support the Plutonian transformation of the Capricorn part of the chart. You don't need to get worked up or bent out of shape on this. I think the larger thing to just contemplate is what feels negative or challenging over the past 4 or 5 days as you head over the next couple of days. Are you feeling compelled to send that email, send that communication, do something to address a transformation, the potential for a power struggle? One of the things that you can do is also go back to the squares that these planets made to Pluto when they entered Taurus. And you can just Google, when did Mercury square Pluto? When did Venus square Pluto? When did the Sun square Pluto? What was going on that was potentially edgy and that was on your mind and that felt like... More conventionally, Pluto stands for some sort of force, some sort of authority, some sort of power figure. And the power figure can be someone with a job title or something that has power, or it can be so interesting what is playing out with the Supreme Court right now with this Mercury-Pluto opposition. I mean, that's so archetypal if we look at Pluto as this kind of the god of the underworld. Pluto has a reputation for being... Power struggles are the term that is most used in a kind of a sinister way. Who has power over us in structures, and who exercises that power, and how is it exercised? And here's Mercury, the planet of communication and cognition and decisions. Fascinating. And of course, these are years where the United States is having its Pluto return. I tend not to do political videos, but I can't help but be kind of... I can't help but just make note of that. Now, in our personal lives, is that something that we are fears being triggered by, insecurities, feeling an uneasiness about power or power struggles? Is there something we feel we need to do and communicate in order to assist with Pluto's transformations in the Capricorn, but especially the Aquarius part of the chart that goes back to January 20th to February 20th of this year? And what we may have noted is the planets entered the sign of Taurus and squared Pluto. Oppositions often pick up on the energy of the squares that precede them and provide another milestone or another development. And know that as Mercury does this, and Mercury will clear it, and Mercury will move forward, Venus, the planet of money and relationships and harmony, is going to have to come face to face with Pluto as we head to July the 12th. Now you might say, Abby, you said July is going to be easier, and here we are talking about all these oppositions to Pluto. These oppositions of Pluto actually kind of take us into the energy of the second half of 2024. And each of us is going to have to think through, right now it's a communication thing. As we head towards July the 12th, it's going to become a values thing. A feeling that relationships and finances are somehow at stake on this. What we don't have till later on in July with that full moon, what we don't have right now is scope for a resolution, and what we don't have is the sun opposing Pluto. And with Pluto, you kind of need that energy because you need the ability, mental knowing is no match for Pluto. Solar knowing is what we need. And that does not occur until we start to head towards that full moon on July the 21st. And the sun opposes Pluto on July the 23rd. That is when we might feel like I'm actually potentially bringing something to a close. I'm finally understanding what these forces are. I'm finally being able to make sense of what these oppositions to Pluto are about. Right now, it may feel like an uneasiness, an edginess, a feeling that some communication needs to be sent, some transaction needs to be done, something needs to be, it could be for certain people a feeling like certain sales need to be made, or, we're talking about Mercury, certain transactions need to occur. Something to do with technology, you need to post more videos, it could, but that really depends on where you have Aquarius in your chart and what Pluto's trying to transform. Themes of feeling like someone is trying to assert some sort of power. I think of Pluto a little bit like also sometimes a kind of a creepy energy. I think of, for example, the movie Room, where you have this person who kind of kidnapped someone and kept them in a room for like decades and weren't discovered or something along those lines. It's not that extreme, but then Pluto has this kind of rapacious energy that is associated with him. He kind of had a reputation for coming out of the underworld and kidnapping people and taking them down, whatever, and striking bizarre deals. And it doesn't show up like that for us all the time. And as I said, those kinds of occurrences are more about, and they can be serious if someone is trying to resist what Pluto is trying to transform for you somewhere. If Pluto is going over your fourth house, for example, and Pluto is trying to somehow redefine your relationship with your mother, or Pluto's going over your first house, and Pluto could be actually, interestingly, it's not going over the seventh. In the first, it could be trying to redefine your relationship with your spouse or your partner. If Pluto's going over your ninth house, it could be trying to reframe. But if those people are trying to hold on to the status quo, Pluto will win. But that's when those power struggles come in. You are blocking my growth. You're keeping me in a place that has no future for me. So that's where that kind of element comes in. More often what I see is that Pluto makes transformations that are for, Pluto going over the sixth, job changes, health-related self-care routines change for one's betterment. Pluto goes over the fourth. Yes, relationship with the mother can be affected, absolutely, but in a way that might be healthy for the client eventually. A relationship with where you live and the homeland can be transformed. So Mercury is not going to be able to fully define and fully figure out what is going on. But you might have an awareness over the past few days of something either resurrecting itself that has a kind of a power struggle component, or something that makes you a little bit edgy and uneasy, and a feeling like some sort of communication needs to be sent that needs to be dealt with. Now, I can't tell you whether you should or you shouldn't. It's an instinctive thing, and especially because there isn't complete clarity yet. As we head to the 12th and Venus does this opposition, it's going to somehow feel like our very values, our relationships, relationship dynamics can be affected by this. Finances, but with Venus, it's really what we value is somehow affect, and it isn't until the sun opposes and the real transformation with the opposition to Pluto, and by that time Pluto is in Aquarius, is going to be when Mars enters Leo and goes retrograde and direct. As I said, that Mars retrograde is striking. Not only does it oppose Pluto 3 times, it also trines, which is lovely, Saturn and Neptune. That Mars retrograde is a really transformational retrograde later this year and early next year. The sun is getting ready to set. I can always tell. Well, I can have a sense of the timing anyway, but the lighting on the video changes. With Pluto, the situations are so individual and the nature of the change can be so individual that it's very hard in general with you to say what you should do. The best that I can do is give you information to try and make sense of it. What should be clear by now is what it is that Pluto has been transforming in the Capricorn part of the chart since 2008. And what you need to do to try and wrap that up. And very often a Pluto transformation is a transit of self-empowerment. Because the changes that it is making for our betterment in terms of, and especially trying to release us from people, situations that are entrapping self-care, self-empowerment, if Pluto's going over your 6th. The right job is empowering. The right location is empowering. Strengthening yourself. Saturn going over the first house, you know, is a spine-building transit and boundaries. But when Pluto goes over your first house, it's just like I mean, talk about self-empowerment. Your very relationships with the people you're committed to, family members, spouses, and it's not always breakups. You know, it can also be coming together with people who it hopefully mutually empowering relationships, but who can empower you. The other aspects being made, as I said, refer back to last week's videos. Mercury trines Neptune, Venus trines Saturn, the sun squares the nodes. The sun squaring the nodes has an edginess to it as well. This may be the other thing that is causing a certain amount of uneasiness over the past 5 days, an awareness that something needs to be addressed. And this could be on a much more intuitive sort of solar visibility level to, is there something that you feel can block you from moving in the direction that you want to move in? With the nodes, it's a north node and the south node work together. The north node in Aries, the south node in Libra, they're the eclipse points, for lack of a different way of describing it in this video. And it's that north node in Aries and releasing something in the south node of Libra, leading into the Aries part of the chart, the house occupied by Aries, releasing the Libra part of something in the Libra part of the chart, that is causing this draw, this direction, this movement, this idea of, oh, I think I feel like I need to move in this direction. So there could also be, over the past few days, heading into tomorrow, kind of a solar, what are the obstacles? What do I need to address in the Cancer part of the chart? So between the sun squaring the nodes and Pluto opposing, and Mercury opposing Pluto, this awareness and this feeling of, I think I need to address something, I need to do something, you know, and some of you might. And then we've got the Venus opposition. As I said, it's not going to be until the sun opposes Pluto and we have that full moon on the 21st that some of this starts to make sense. I will still maintain that in comparison to June, there's just greater forward movement. If you just think through, really be clear about your intentions. This is the best advice I can give you with everything here. If you have to feel like you have to confront something, or you have to protect yourself in some way, or you need to be clear about something, or you need to send that communication, and if you feel like there's an element of power associated with it, taking your power back in a situation, expressing your power in a situation, dealing with a situation where there is a bit of a power struggle potentially. Someone can thwart you, someone can accuse you of something unfairly, someone can justify something, there can be a misunderstanding. And I'm using the word misunderstanding because Mercury is involved. Communication can be clarifying. Be clear about your intentions and just make sure that you are not inflaming the situation with regard to your intentions. It may still inflame the situation because if someone is trying to hold on to something or whatever it is, that they get upset that you have tried to assert yourself in some way. But if the intentions are clear and it reads a certain way, then the likelihood of that issue is less. And if they do, then you really know what's going on. And what, as you get closer to Venus opposing Pluto, you know what it is that you need to protect. I mean, with the Sun squaring the nodes, we don't, until Mars squares the nodes much later, we have no more squares to the nodes. And one of the things that's lovely is that, this is the thing about the squares and the trines. As I have said to you, don't get too absorbed and too obsessed about them, because the squares happen and then the trines happen. I mean, very soon, on the 8th of July, Mercury is going to trine the North Node. So these squares to the nodes are going to turn into trines to the North Node, facilitating flow in a certain direction. That doesn't mean that the squares to the North Node and an awareness of potential opposition to where it is that you might want to go shouldn't be taken stock of and taken seriously. That doesn't mean that the oppositions to Pluto, but the oppositions will be followed by trines eventually. They'll be followed by squares, and they'll be followed by conjunctions. And those of us who've been around the sun a few times know that we've survived a lot. But still, sometimes these things come up to warn us and to make us aware of things that have to be addressed or could become problems. I'm not going to poo-poo the square to the North Node and the opposition to Pluto at all. So if there's an awareness of the past 4 or 5 days of potential obstacles, power struggles, something that can thwart you, and a feeling that you need to review, become aware of something, it's almost going to feel like something very internal and intuitive is guiding you with regard to what needs to be communicated. Just as I said, don't go head to head with Pluto. If you're dealing with someone who is resisting empowering you, it's Mercury, it's not Mars. And sometimes a direct confrontation can make the situation worse, whereas a communication that is cleaner with regard to intentions and clear about what it is that is being expressed, but in a way that is at least kind of continuing to build a bridge or clarify things, might go further in achieving a particular aim. So by all means, take stock of the sun squaring the nodes, an awareness of obstacles with regard to the direction you may want to move in. Mercury opposing Pluto. What can I do in terms of my thinking, my planning, my transactions, my mental and communicative activities? Why do I need to pause and look to the transformations, especially in the Aquarius part of the chart, which are not entirely clear to me what that's going to look like? I know what it is that I want there over the next 19 years, but I also can think about what happened between January 20th and February 20th and think about the squares to Pluto and what they felt like earlier this year. And you can always, when you do something like Google Mercury square Pluto, look at the Astrology King website, because he lists the dates of the transits. You scroll a little bit lower and he lists the dates of those transits. Very helpful in terms of being able to provide those dates. When it comes to astrological interpretation online or in videos, it's a very personal thing. I'm not going to not recommend whatever, because certain things may resonate, certain things may not. And it can all sort of become a rabbit hole. But at the same time, a useful resource, a valuable resource is a valuable resource. All of that can put you in mind to try and put some clues around what it is that's making you uneasy and what you should or should not do. If you did something before and it did not work, but you're feeling the urge to do it again, is it worth doing or not? Is it better to not take it? Some of it's going to have that kind of energy with the Sun and Mercury involved. The Sun kind of making things internally aware with regard to the nodes, and Mercury looking to Pluto. As I said, the oppositions to Pluto are an ongoing, there's a thread to them that takes us all the way to April of next year. And in some ways, the oppositions to Pluto, because as I've said to you, it's not till June of next year, but it is the retrogrades stop, with Venus being the last retrograde to stop in the middle of April of next year. And then we have a certain amount of resolution and forward movement that takes us to the end of the first week of June of next year. And we get to close out a certain cycle that started on April 19th of 2023 until then. Some people may say that the cycle ends even later with the full moon in Aries, but for all intents and purposes, I'm putting it at the end of the first week of June. Greater flow, hopefully greater productivity for all of you over the past week, 10 days since the full moon. This week, the energy may dip as we head to the new moon in Cancer. The new moon in Cancer brings some flow to it, which we cannot ignore. The pleasanter transits, Venus trining Saturn and Mercury trining Neptune, fine, brings in a certain amount of flow and relief from some of the energies of June. Again, great. The Sun squaring the nodes tomorrow and Mercury opposing Pluto on Wednesday. Those are the two edgy transits. And the last 5 odd days, just think about what has been building up that may have given you a sense, an awareness of obstacles. Now, this could very much be a feeling of, oh, I'm ready to dive off the diving board with the Sun squaring the nodes, and oh, something has come to my awareness and I can't. And with Mercury opposing Pluto, there's no question in this regard. The question that has to be asked is, of the faster moving planet, how, from where it is, it can serve the slower moving planet. And I am fully aware that in a general reading, that's a very vague thing, but the lens that I can give you to think about it is, it may feel a little bit like there's an urge to communicate something. And you may choose to do it or you may choose to not do it, because sometimes dealing with Plutonian kind of power struggles, some schools of thought may say it's best to not take any action at all, because any action is going to have some sort of consequences. All I'm going to say is, if you feel the need to do it, just make sure your intentions are as clean and clear as possible internally, so they can be translated externally. And there's more to follow with Venus getting ready to oppose Pluto in the middle of July, and especially the Sun opposing Pluto on the 23rd of this month, with that full moon in Capricorn conjuncting Pluto on the 21st of July. And that full moon, has a fair amount of positive energy behind it. As I said, when you have a full moon in Capricorn like the one we did, I really have to end this soon, because soon I'm just going to disappear on your screen. Full moon in Capricorn on June 21st, that was edgier and squaring Neptune, to the full moon in Capricorn on the 21st of July. And if you look at my full moon video on July 21st, it's kind of looking ahead for a month. The full moon of June 21st video that I did, last full moon video. And it's worth because there is a narrative, there's something that that full moon initiates, that then that full moon, second full moon in Capricorn, in the last degree of Capricorn, resolves with the sun finally trining Neptune and the full moon trining Uranus and conjuncting Pluto. There's something transformational about it. It's interesting, this awareness of, you know, this idea that you might get, there might be a development again that occurs around the 21st of July that continues to pull you forward in this May, June, July forward momentum, only to pause in August, and that takes us to June of next year. And an awareness with this opposition and these oppositions and the sun squaring the nodes of things that can be obstacles, and what do I do about it? And right now, do I need to communicate something about it? More to follow as things go. The next couple of videos, I do want to give you kind of an overview of what's going to happen to the planets as they move into Leo and what aspects they'll be making. And I want to talk a little bit about Uranus trine Pluto, at least to give you a heads up. I've already given you a heads up it's coming, but I feel like I need to do a video around it. If you found this video useful, feel free to share, tell your friends about it. Feel free to give it circulation if you think someone's going to benefit from it. If you would like me to take a look at your chart and read your chart for you, or do a reading for you, or if you would like me to make an easy to read version of your chart so you can use that to follow along with these videos, you can contact me in the email address in the description below. I can send you rates about that. You can use the thanks button to support the channel if you like. Feel free to like and comment on the video. It gives the video greater circulation. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already, and especially if you're watching these videos from Facebook and Twitter, because that will stop by the end of July. And next to the subscribe button is a bell icon. If you hover over that, there's a wiggly bell on top. Click on that and you'll be notified when I do new videos. It is time to stop this video. Let us do our best to continue to be as productive as we can this week, and start to swim to the other side and take action, because in general, even though some of the transits I've talked about in this video are a little bit challenging, there's greater flow. And after the July 5th new moon till the July 21st new moon, the full moon, there really is possibility to manifest and develop, and there's going to be a certain amount of balancing that is going to need to be done, but we'll develop that in future videos, and not in the darkness. All right, take care.